The emergency broadcast came through every communication channel in the galaxy at exactly 0947 Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Kale Vex of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the transmission array on what remained of his command ship, his four, eyes filled with tears that sparkled like diamonds in the dim light. Behind him, through the massive viewport, the burning remains of 3 Zephyrian worlds painted the darkness with orange and red flames. To all civilized species of the galaxy, Kale Vex began, his voice breaking despite his diplomatic training. This is Ambassador Kale Vex of the Zephyrian Empire. We are dying. The words echoed across space, reaching the crystal spires of the hegemony homeworld, the underwater cities of the Aquatic Federation, and the massive space stations that housed a dozen other galactic powers. In the Grand Council chambers of Nexus Station, representatives from 47 different species received the message. Simultaneously, Kale Vex continued his desperate plea. The Void Swarm has consumed 11 of our 12 star systems. Our population of 40 billion has been reduced to less than 2 million survivors. Our fleet of 800 ships now numbers 37. We have perhaps 20 of your Earth. Days before our homeworld falls to these creatures. The transmission showed images that made even the most hardened military observers recoil in horror. The Void Swarm ships were not built but grown, massive biomechanical nightmares that consumed everything in their path. They had no interest in conquest or communication. They simply devoured entire civilizations and moved on to the next target. We have fought for 3 years, Kale Vex said, his voice growing weaker. We have used every weapon, every strategy, every advantage our science could provide. Nothing has stopped them. They adapt to our weapons within hours. They learn our tactics and counter them. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They do not show mercy. In the council chambers, the crystalline hegemony representative was the first to speak. Her crystal form chimed with sympathetic harmonics, but her words carried no hope. The hegemony extends its deepest condolences to the Zephyrian people. However, our military forces are currently engaged in defending our border worlds from 3 separate conflicts. We cannot spare ships for offensive operations. The Aquatic Federation representative followed, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with regret. The Federation mourns with you, honored Kale Vex. We can offer refugee ships and humanitarian aid, but our combat vessels are not designed for the type of warfare the Swarm employs. One by one, each major galactic power offered sympathy, resources, or safe haven for refugees, but none offered military intervention. The robotic collective cited probability calculations showing a 97.3% chance of fleet destruction. The insectoid hives claimed their ships were already committed to territorial disputes. The gas giant coalition explained that their vessels were not suitable for combat in standard space. At the back of the chamber, Admiral Kate Sullivan sat quietly in the human observer section. Earth had been granted membership in the Galactic Council only 15 years earlier, after humanity's first contact with alien life through a damaged Zephyrian exploration vessel. Most species still considered humans to be newcomers, interesting but ultimately insignificant in galactic affairs. Admiral Sullivan was 53 years old, with gray streaking through her brown hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many difficult decisions. She had commanded Earth's deep space patrol for 8 years, overseeing humanity's small but growing presence among the stars. Her uniform bore the simple insignia of the United Earth Space Forces, far less ornate than the elaborate regalia worn by representatives of older galactic powers. As the council session continued, it became clear that no military aid would be forthcoming. The Zephyrian Empire, once a proud civilization that had helped establish the Galactic Council itself, would be left to face extinction alone. The mathematics were brutal and simple. The Void Swarm had consumed 12 civilizations in the past century, each one with superior technology and larger fleets than any single council member possessed. When the formal session concluded, Ambassador Kalevex remained at his transmission station, staring at the display that showed his dying homeworld. His diplomatic staff had already begun preparing refugee ships for the final evacuation. In 20 days, the Zephyrian Empire would cease to exist. Admiral Sullivan approached the communication station where Kalevex maintained his connection to the council chambers. The other representatives had already begun filing out their expressions, ranging from genuine sorrow to barely concealed relief that the threat was not their problem. "Ambassador," Sullivan said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "how much time do your people actually have?" Kalevex looked up at the human admiral, his 4 eyes focusing with difficulty. Despair had a way of making everything seem distant and unreal. "Admiral Sullivan, I appreciate your concern, but the mathematics are clear. The swarm will reach Zephyr Prime in 18 to 20 standard days. We have perhaps 50 ships that remain. Combat capable, though calling them capable is generous." Sullivan nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "And how many swarm vessels are you facing?" "Current estimates suggest between 10 and 12,000 ships of various sizes," Kalevex replied. "Their smallest vessels are equivalent to our frigates, while their largest biomechanical constructs are the size of our space stations." Admiral Sullivan was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays that showed the swarm's relentless advance through Zephyrian space. The alien formations moved with the precision of a natural disaster, consuming everything in their path with mechanical efficiency. "Expect human ships within 10 days," Sullivan said finally. The words were spoken so quietly that Kalevex almost missed them. When their meaning registered, his 4 eyes widened in shock. "Admiral, did you say human ships would arrive?" 10 days, Sullivan repeated, her tone matter of fact. "Maybe less if we push the engines." Other representatives within earshot had stopped their conversations to listen. The crystalline hegemony's ambassador chimed with what could only be described as laughter. "Admiral Sullivan, while your species' compassion is admirable, your entire fleet consists of perhaps 200 vessels. The Void Swarm has destroyed fleets 10 times that size." Admiral Sullivan turned to face the larger chamber, where a dozen representatives had gathered to witness this unexpected development. Her expression remained calm and professional, but something in her eyes suggested depths that the other species had not previously noticed. "You're absolutely right," Sullivan said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Earth's fleet is small compared to most of yours. We have newer ships, but fewer of them. By any rational calculation, we should stay home and prepare our own defenses." She paused, looking directly at each representative in turn. "But you've made one critical error in your calculations. You've never seen what happens when humans are asked to help." The robotic collective's representative processed this statement with visible confusion. "Admiral Sullivan, emotion and determination cannot overcome mathematical reality. The probability of success remains 0.02%, regardless of the attacking force's motivation." Admiral Sullivan smiled, and for a moment her expression reminded several observers of a predator that had just spotted prey. "That's the thing about humans. We've never been very good at accepting mathematical reality when people need help." She activated her personal communicator and spoke in clear, measured tones. "This is Admiral Sullivan to Earth Command. Authorization. Code Alpha 77. Implement Operation Legendary Response immediately. All available ships to proceed to Zephyrian space with maximum haste." The communication channel crackled with static before a response came through. "Admiral, this is General Rivera at Earth Command. Confirm Operation Legendary Response. Are you requesting full fleet deployment?" "Negative, General," Sullivan replied, still smiling that predatory smile. "I'm requesting everything we have. Military, civilian, commercial, museum pieces if they can make the trip. Every ship that can mount a weapon or carry supplies." Ambassador Kale Vex stared at the human admiral in disbelief. "Admiral, surely. You cannot mean to commit your entire civilization to this battle." Sullivan's expression softened slightly as she looked at the desperate Zephyrian diplomat. "Ambassador, 18 months ago, your people found one of our exploration ships disabled in deep space. You could have left us to die, but instead you rescued our crew and returned them safely to Earth. You didn't know us. You owed us nothing, but you helped anyway." She gestured toward the displays, showing the burning Zephyrian worlds. "Now you need help. The way I see it, that makes this our fight too." The other representatives watched in stunned silence as Admiral Sullivan prepared to leave the chamber. The insectoid hive's speaker finally found her voice. "Admiral, this is madness. You will be sending your people to their deaths for strangers." Admiral Sullivan paused at the chamber entrance and looked back at the assembled representatives. "That's where you're wrong. Ambassador Kelvex and his people aren't strangers anymore. They're friends who need help." As she walked away, her final words echoed through the chamber. "You're about to learn something about humans that we've never had to show thee." Admiral Sullivan's message reached Earth's Strategic Command exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes after she transmitted it from Nexus Station. The quantum communication relay, buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps, received the coded transmission and immediately forwarded it to President Marcus. Chun's emergency briefing room in Geneva. President Chun was reviewing agricultural reports when his aide burst through the doors without knocking. "Sir, we have a priority alpha message from Admiral Sullivan. She's implemented Operation Legendary Response." Chun looked up from his tablet, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to sharp focus in seconds. Operation Legendary Response was a theoretical contingency plan that had never been intended for actual use. It was the kind of plan military strategists created for impossible scenarios, the sort of document that gathered dust in classified archives. "Get me the full command staff in the war room, immediately," Chun ordered. "And I mean everyone. Defense Secretary Walsh, General Rivera, Admiral Park, Director Lopez from Intelligence, and Dr. Santos from the Science Council." 20 minutes later, the underground command center buzzed with activity as Earth's top military and civilian leadership gathered around the massive holographic display table. Admiral Sullivan's recorded message played on repeat while tactical displays showed the current positions of every human ship in known space. General Carlos Rivera, Earth's Chief of Naval Operations, stood beside the main display with his arms crossed. He was a veteran of the Mars colonial wars and had commanded space fleets for over 2 decades. His weathered face showed the strain of a man who understood exactly what Admiral Sullivan was asking them to do. "The numbers are brutal," Rivera said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "We have 247 active military vessels scattered across 12 star systems. The Void Swarm, according to Galactic Council intelligence, has over 10,000 ships. We would be outnumbered 40 to 1. Dr. Lisa Santos, the chief science advisor, pulled up the intelligence files on the Void Swarm that Earth had received from the Galactic Council membership. The data painted a terrifying picture of biological ships that adapted to weapons, learned from tactics, and showed no mercy to any form of life they encountered. "They've destroyed 12 civilizations in the past century," Dr. Santos reported. "Each one had technological advantages we don't possess. The Zephyrians have energy shields that can deflect our best weapons. The crystalline hegemony has ships that can repair themselves in combat. If these advanced civilizations couldn't stop the swarm, what chance do we have?" Defense Secretary Walsh, a former naval officer turned politician, leaned back in his chair. with a grim expression. "Admiral Sullivan is asking us to commit suicide. Even if we sent every ship we have, we'd be throwing away Earth's entire defensive capability for a battle we cannot win." President Chun had remained silent throughout. The briefing, studying the displays and listening to his advisors debate the impossible mathematics of the situation. He walked to the main tactical display that showed Earth's fleet positions spread across human space like tiny points of light in an ocean of darkness. "How many ships can we actually mobilize?" Chun asked quietly. Admiral Park, Earth Senior, naval strategist, consulted her tablet before responding. "If we recall every vessel from patrol duty, exploration missions, and defensive positions, we could assemble approximately 270 ships within 10 days. But, sir, that would leave Earth and our colonies completely defenseless. And how many civilian vessels do we have that could be converted for combat or support operations?" Chun continued. General Rivera frowned at the question. "Mr. President, civilian conversions would take weeks or months to implement properly. We're talking about merchant ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners. They're not built for combat. But they could carry supplies, medical equipment, spare parts?" Chun pressed. "Yes, sir, but converting civilian ships for a military operation of this scale has never been attempted. The logistics alone would be a nightmare." President Chun stood silently for several minutes, studying the star charts that showed the vast distances between Earth and Zephyrian space. The journey would take every human ship to the edge of known space, far from any possibility of retreat or reinforcement. "What do we know about Admiral Sullivan's reasoning for this decision?" Chun asked. Director Lopez from Intelligence cleared his throat. "Sir, our sources indicate that the Zephyrians rescued a damaged human exploration vessel 18 months ago. They could have ignored the distress call, but instead they provided medical aid and escorted our people safely home. So this is about repaying a debt?" "Partly, sir. But our psychological profiles of Admiral Sullivan suggest she genuinely believes this is the right thing to do, regardless of the odds." President Chun nodded slowly. "And what does our analysis tell us about the consequences if the Zephyrian Empire falls?" Dr. Santos activated another display showing the Void Swarm's historical expansion pattern. Based on their previous behavior, they would continue consuming civilizations along the galactic rim. Current projections suggest they would reach human space within 50 to 70 years. "So we're not just fighting for the Zephyrians," Chun observed. "We're fighting for ourselves, just 50 years earlier than we planned." Defense Secretary Walsh shook his head. "Mr. President, even if that analysis is correct, we have 50 years to prepare proper defenses. Throwing away our fleet now for a hopeless battle doesn't serve anyone's interests." General Rivera pulled up Earth's industrial capacity reports. "Sir, we have to consider our limitations. Our shipyards are already operating at maximum capacity. If we lose our fleet in Zephyrian space, it would take us 15 years to rebuild even half of what we have now." President Chun walked around the tactical display, studying the positions of human ships across known space. Mining vessels in the asteroid belt, exploration ships at the edge of human territory, cargo haulers running supplies between colonies, and the handful of massive passenger liners that connected Earth's far-flung settlements. "Send the order," Chun said finally. The room fell silent. Admiral Park was the first to speak. "Sir, which order?" "All of them." Chun's voice was calm but carried absolute authority. "Every human vessel capable of faster-than-light travel is to proceed immediately to Zephyrian space. Military ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining vessels, exploration ships, even the museum pieces if they can make the journey." General Rivera stepped forward. "Mr. President, with respect, you're ordering our entire civilization into battle. This goes beyond military action. You're committing every resource we have. Yes, I am. Chun turned to face his staff. Send word to every ship captain, every crew chief, every person commanding a human vessel anywhere in space. This is not a draft. This is not a military order. This is a request. We're asking them to volunteer for something that might get them killed. Dr. Santos looked puzzled. Sir, why frame it as a request rather than an order? President Chun smiled. For the first time since the briefing began. Because that's what makes us human. We don't force people to be heroes. We ask them to choose to be heroes. The orders went out within the hour, transmitted on every communication frequency used by human vessels. The message was simple and direct. Operation Legendary Response is now active. All ships capable of faster-than-light travel are requested to proceed immediately to Zephyrian space to render aid to a civilization facing extinction. This is a volunteer mission. Earth Command acknowledges this request may result in the loss of all participating vessels. Choose accordingly. The responses began coming back within minutes. Captain Jake Morrison of the battlecruiser U.S. Washington was the first to reply. Washington proceeding to Zephyrian space at maximum speed. Estimated arrival in 8 days. Captain Nina Rodriguez, commanding the stealth frigate squadron, reported next. Phantom division en route. We'll scout ahead and provide reconnaissance. But the most surprising responses came from the civilian sector. Captain Ben Clark, commanding the luxury cruise liner UEC Paradise, sent a message that would be remembered for generations. Paradise converting to hospital ship, requesting all available medical personnel to meet us at Luna Station. We're going to save some lives. Captain Pete Adams, whose mining vessel Asteroid King was designed to strip mine asteroids, transmitted simply, if these swarm things are tough as everyone says, they're about to meet equipment designed to crack open rocks the size of mountains. Within 6 hours, over 400 human vessels had volunteered for the mission. Ships that had never been designed for combat began emergency conversions. Cargo bays were cleared for makeshift medical facilities. Mining equipment was reconfigured as weapon systems. Passenger lounges became briefing rooms for hastily assembled military units. President Chun watched the responses flood in from the command center, his expression mixing pride with deep concern. General Rivera stood beside him, shaking his head in amazement. Sir, this is either the most heroic thing our species has ever attempted, or the most catastrophic mistake in human history. Chun nodded without taking his eyes off the display, showing hundreds of human ships beginning their journey toward an impossible battle. General, those might be the same thing, but at least we'll find out who we. The rendezvous point was Haven's Rest, a small neutral system 3 light-years from Zephyrian space that contained nothing but empty asteroids and a small trading post. Admiral Sullivan had chosen it because the system's position allowed easy access from multiple jump routes while remaining hidden from void swarm scouts. The first ships to arrive were Captain Rodriguez's stealth frigates, slipping out of dark space like shadows given form. The UES Phantom and her sister ships immediately began deploying sensor nets and early warning systems throughout the system. Rodriguez was a former intelligence officer who had requested transfer to Deep Space Patrol after growing tired of politics and paperwork. Admiral, this is Phantom, Rodriguez reported to Admiral Sullivan aboard the UES Liberty. System is clear of hostile contacts. Beginning establishment of perimeter watch. The next wave of arrivals came 6 hours later when the main battle fleet emerged from hyperspace in tight formation. The battlecruiser UES Washington led the group, her massive hull bristling with missile pods and energy weapons. Captain Morrison had commanded the Washington for 3 years and was considered one of Earth's finest tactical officers. Behind the Washington came the heavy cruisers Denver and Seattle, followed by 24 destroyers and frigates that formed the core of Earth's deep space fleet. These were the ships designed for combat, built in Earth's orbital shipyards with the best technology humanity could produce. But as the hours passed, the true scope of humanity's response became clear to the small Galactic Council observation post that had been established to monitor what they assumed would be a brief and tragic intervention. Observer Yith Cole of the Tentacle Directorate found himself sending increasingly frantic reports back to Nexus Station. Initial intelligence indicated human military strength of approximately 250 vessels. Current count exceeds 400 ships and continues growing. Recommend immediate analysis revision. The civilian conversions began arriving in groups throughout the day. Captain Ben Clark's cruise liner, UES Paradise, had been completely transformed during its journey from Earth. The luxury suites had been converted into medical bays. The dining halls now served as supply distribution centers, and the observation decks housed emergency communication equipment. Clark was a veteran of the commercial space lanes, who had spent 15 years ferrying passengers between Earth's colonies. He had never expected to command a ship in combat, but when the call came for medical support vessels, he had volunteered immediately. Paradise to Liberty, Clark transmitted as his ship took position near the center of the growing fleet. We have 2,000 medical volunteers aboard, including 500 doctors and nurses, ready to receive casualties whenever you need us. Captain Pete Adams arrived with a convoy of mining vessels that looked more like flying scrapyards than military ships. The Asteroid King and her companion miners had been hastily fitted with missile launchers and armor plating, creating vessels that no military academy would recognize as proper warships. Adams was a third-generation asteroid miner who had learned to fly in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. His ships were designed to tear apart rocks the size of city blocks, and he had suggested to Earth Command that void swarm bioships might not be much different from unusually aggressive asteroids. Liberty, this is Asteroid King, Adams reported. Mining division ready for deployment. We may not look pretty, but these rigs can crack open anything that grows or gets built. The cargo haulers arrived next, their massive holds filled with spare parts, ammunition, fuel, and food supplies. Captain Maria Santos commanded the UES New Hope, a colony ship that had been recalled from a settlement mission and converted into a mobile supply depot. Santos had originally been selected to establish humanity's newest colony on the edge of explored space. When the call came for volunteer ships, she had turned her vessel around without hesitation, bringing along the 3,000 colonists who had volunteered to serve as support crew. New Hope to Fleet Command, Santos transmitted. We have enough supplies to keep this fleet running for 60 days of intensive combat operations. My colonists are ready to serve as damage control teams and technical support. But the arrivals that truly shocked the galactic observers were the museum ships. These were vessels from humanity's early space exploration era, ships that should have been retired decades ago, but had been lovingly maintained by historical societies and space museums. Admiral Helen Cross emerged from hyperspace commanding the UES Enterprise, a ship that had been built during humanity's first wave of interstellar exploration. Cross was 78 years old and had officially retired 5 years earlier. But when she learned that museum ships were being called to active duty, she had come out of retirement. Enterprise to Admiral Sullivan, Cross transmitted her, voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded ships when Admiral Sullivan was still a cadet. Museum Division reporting for duty. We may be old, but we're still spaceworthy and ready to fight. The Enterprise was followed by a dozen other historical vessels, each one representing a different era of human space exploration. Ships that had carried the first colonists to distant worlds, vessels that had mapped unknown star systems, and even experimental craft that had tested technologies long since superseded. Captain Jack Turner commanded the UES Explorer, a research vessel from humanity's first contact with alien life. Turner was a xenobiologist who had spent his career studying alien ecosystems, but his ship had been fitted with weapons and added to the combat roster. Explorer reporting, Turner transmitted. We may be scientists, but we've studied enough alien biology to know where these swarm creatures might be vulnerable. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the tactical display as more ships continued to arrive. Her tactical officer, Commander Alex Turner, ran continuous updates on fleet strength and composition. Admiral, current count is 847 vessels present and accounted for, Turner reported. That includes everything from main battle cruisers to converted yachts with missile pods bolted to their hulls. Commander Betty Hayes, Sullivan's executive officer, studied the fleet composition with amazement. Ma'am, this has to be the most unusual military force ever assembled. Half these ships were never designed for combat operations. Sullivan nodded, but her expression showed pride rather than concern. Commander Hayes, you're looking at something the galaxy has never seen before. This isn't just a military fleet. This is an entire civilization that decided to help. The final arrivals came 18 hours after the rendezvous began. Captain Lisa Park brought in the last group of volunteer vessels, including private yachts, research ships, and even a few racing craft that their owners had volunteered for courier duty. Park commanded the UES Freedom, a fast courier ship that had been converted to carry emergency supplies and serve as a communications relay. She was one of Earth's youngest ship captains, having earned her command through exceptional skill rather than years of service. Freedom to Liberty, Park reported. Final convoy present and accounted for. That should be everyone who volunteered for this mission. Observer Yithkol sent his final report to the Galactic Council with a tone of disbelief that translated across species barriers. Human fleet composition defies all military doctrine and tactical analysis. Force includes luxury vessels, industrial equipment, historical artifacts, and civilian craft modified for combat operations. Total vessel count exceeds 900 ships. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment of human capabilities. Admiral Sullivan called a fleet-wide conference using the Paradise's converted communication systems. Captain Clark had installed the most powerful civilian transmitters available, allowing every ship in the massive fleet to receive clear communications simultaneously. All ships. This is Admiral Sullivan aboard the Liberty, she began. In 6 hours, we will proceed to Zephyrian space to engage the Void Swarm. I want every captain and crew member to understand exactly what we're facing. The tactical displays throughout the fleet showed the current situation in Zephyrian space. 3 worlds burned under swarm occupation, while the remaining Zephyrian ships fought a desperate delaying action around their homeworld. Intelligence estimates put swarm strength at over 10,000 vessels of various sizes. They have destroyed 12 civilizations using superior numbers, adaptive technology, and complete ruthlessness. By any rational calculation, we should not attempt this mission. Sullivan paused, looking around her bridge at the crew members who had volunteered to follow her into an impossible battle. But we're not here because of rational calculations. We're here because someone asked for help, and helping people in need is what humans do. The response came from every ship in the fleet simultaneously, hundreds of captains and thousands of crew members acknowledging their understanding and their commitment. From the newest battle cruiser to the oldest museum piece, from luxury liners to mining barges, the entire fleet confirmed their readiness for battle. All ships prepare for jump to Zephyrian space, Sullivan ordered. Formation Legendary will be implemented upon arrival. Remember, we're not just representing Earth today. We're showing the galaxy what it means to be human. The massive fleet began its final preparations as hundreds of ships moved into jump formation. It was the human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system to witness a scene of devastation that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. 3 Zephyrian worlds burned in the distance, their surfaces covered with writhing black masses that pulsed like infected wounds against the stars. The Void Swarm had transformed entire planets into breeding grounds for their biomechanical horrors. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the tactical displays update as her sensors cataloged the nightmare before them. The swarm fleet was even larger than intelligence estimates had suggested, with massive motherships the size of small moons surrounded by thousands of smaller vessels that moved with the coordination of a single organism. "Tactical report," Sullivan ordered, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Commander Alex Turner worked frantically at his station, trying to process the flood of sensor data. "Admiral, I'm reading approximately 12,000 swarm vessels of various sizes. Their smallest ships are frigate class, but their largest constructs are bigger than anything in our fleet." The surviving Zephyrian fleet hung in desperate formation around their homeworld, their once proud ships now scarred and battered from 3 years of constant warfare. Only 37 Zephyrian vessels remained combat-capable, and even those showed signs of critical damage. Ambassador Kalevex's transmission reached the Liberty with static-filled desperation. "Human fleet, we detect your arrival, but cannot believe our sensors. How many ships do you have?" Admiral Sullivan activated the fleet-wide communication system, ensuring every human captain could hear her response. "Ambassador, we brought everyone we could find. All Zephyrian vessels fall back to defensive positions around your homeworld. We'll handle the rest." Captain Rodriguez aboard the stealth frigate Phantom was already moving her squadron into position for reconnaissance runs. "Liberty, this is Phantom. Beginning deep scan of swarm formations. These things are bigger than our intelligence suggested." The Void Swarm responded to the human arrival with typical hive mind efficiency. The massive bioships began turning toward the new threat with movements that seemed too fluid for vessels of their size. Each swarm ship appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with internal light. Captain Morrison aboard the Washington studied the approaching enemy formations with growing concern. "Liberty, this is Washington. Enemy ships are accelerating toward our position. Estimate contact in 40 minutes. Admiral Sullivan had spent the journey from Haven's Rest developing Formation Legendary, a 3-dimensional deployment pattern that would allow human ships to support each other while maximizing their tactical flexibility. It was unlike anything taught in galactic military academies, but it played to humanity's greatest strength, unpredictability. "All ships, implement Formation Legendary," Sullivan ordered. "Museum Division, you have the honor of opening this dance." Admiral Cross aboard the Enterprise acknowledged the order with the calm professionalism of someone who had faced impossible odds before. Museum Division acknowledging. "All historical vessels form up on Enterprise. Let's show these youngsters how it's done." The museum ships accelerated toward the swarm's outer perimeter, their ancient weapon systems coming online for the first time in decades. The Enterprise led the charge, followed by ships that represented every era of human space. Exploration. They were outgunned, outarmored, and outnumbered, but their crews were volunteers who understood they were making history. Captain Turner, aboard the Explorer, opened fire first. His research vessels hastily mounted weapons, striking a swarm scout with surprising effectiveness. "All ships targeting their sensor clusters appears to disrupt their coordination," he reported. The first engagement lasted 17 minutes and defied every military expert's predictions. The museum ships, fighting with outdated weapons and ancient tactics, somehow managed to destroy 43 swarm vessels before being forced to retreat. The Enterprise limped back to the main fleet with her port side destroyed, but Admiral Cross was still transmitting tactical data. "Liberty, this is Enterprise," Cross reported, her voice strained but determined. "These things bleed, just like anything else. Their coordination breaks down when you hit the right spots." Captain Santos, aboard the colony ship New Hope, watched the battle from her position in the support formation. "Enterprise, this is New Hope. We're moving to provide damage control assistance. Hold position." The main battle began as Admiral Sullivan committed the full fleet to combat. The human ships spread out in formation legendary, creating a three-dimensional web that allowed each vessel to support multiple others while maintaining tactical flexibility. It was a formation that required constant communication and split-second timing. But human crews had trained for exactly this kind of coordination. Captain Adams led the mining division into the heart of the swarm formation with the kind of reckless courage that asteroid miners were famous for. "All mining vessels, target the big ones. If we can crack asteroids, we can crack these overgrown bugs." The Asteroid King's industrial cutting beams sliced through swarm by or more like it was tissue paper. The mining ship's reinforced hull absorbed weapons fire that would have destroyed a conventional warship, while her crew used asteroid cracking techniques to tear apart enemy vessels from the inside. "Liberty, this is Asteroid King," Adams reported with obvious satisfaction. "These swarm ships are tougher than rocks, but they're not tougher than mining equipment designed to process rocks." Captain Clark, aboard the Paradise, coordinated medical operations from his position behind the main battle line. The converted cruise liner had become the fleet's primary hospital, receiving wounded from both human and Zephyrian ships. All vessels, Paradise has medical teams standing by. "We're taking casualties, but saving lives." The swarm adapted to human tactics with frightening speed, but they had never encountered an enemy that changed tactics as quickly as humans did. Captain Rodriguez's stealth squadron appeared and disappeared throughout the battle, striking at command vessels and disrupting swarm coordination. "Phantom to all ships," Rodriguez transmitted. "Their command structure is biological. Take out. The big ugly ones and the little ones get confused." The converted civilian ships proved their worth in ways no military planner had anticipated. Cargo haulers became mobile weapons platforms. Passenger liners served as command and control centers, and research vessels provided real-time analysis of swarm weaknesses. Captain, park aboard the courier ship Freedom, darted between larger vessels, carrying ammunition and spare parts to ships that needed them most. "This is Freedom. Resupply run complete. The Washington is back to full ammunition load." The battle raged for 36 hours without pause. Human ships fell to swarm bioweapons, but for every human vessel destroyed, 3 swarm ships died in them. Return. The key was humanity's unpredictability. Where other species fought with rigid doctrine and established tactics, human commanders adapted constantly. Captain Turner discovered that swarm ships were vulnerable to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Captain Santos found that their bioarmor weakened when exposed to specific chemical compounds. Captain Adams proved that their internal structures couldn't withstand the kind of industrial-grade punishment that mining equipment delivered. Zephyrian survivors watched in amazement as the human fleet fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive determination that no other species had ever displayed. Ships that should have been destroyed in the first minutes of combat continued fighting with jury-rigged weapons and improvised tactics. "All human vessels, this is Ambassador Kalevex," the Zephyrian diplomat transmitted. "Your courage honors our species and shamus those who would not help. Whatever happens here, the galaxy will remember this day." Admiral Sullivan stood on her bridge, coordinating the battle while watching her ships fight against impossible odds. The tactical display showed human vessels scattered throughout the combat zone, each one fighting with everything they had. "Admiral, we're losing ships faster than we can replace them," Commander Turner reported. "Current projections show fleet combat effectiveness will drop below critical levels within 8 hours. Sullivan nodded grimly. The mathematics were brutal, but something else was happening that the computers couldn't calculate. The swarm ships were beginning to show signs of confusion and coordination breakdown. Their hive mind was struggling to adapt to human unpredictability. "All ships, this is Liberty," Sullivan transmitted. "We've hurt them more than they expected. Now we're going to show them what happens when humans get really angry." The human fleet regrouped for what would become the final phase of the battle. A desperate assault that would either break the swarm or destroy humanity's fleet completely. But as the ships formed up for their last attack, every captain and crew member understood they were fighting for more than just the Zephyrian Empire. They were showing the galaxy exactly what humans were capable of when innocent people needed help. The final phase of the battle began when Admiral Sullivan made a decision that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. With her fleet reduced to fewer than 600 operational ships and the Void Swarm still fielding over 8,000 vessels, she ordered the converted civilian ships to form the spearhead of a direct assault on the swarm motherships. "All ships, this is Liberty," Sullivan transmitted to her battered fleet. "We've proven we can fight them, and we've proven we can hurt them. Now we're going to prove we can beat them. Civilian Conversion Division, form up on my position." We're going right down their throats. The massive converted cargo haulers, mining vessels, and passenger liners that had never been designed for combat began, moving toward the center of the swarm formation where the largest bioships waited. These motherships were each the size of small moons, their surfaces crawling with weapons and defensive systems that had evolved over centuries of conquest. Captain Adams aboard the Asteroid King led the assault, his mining vessels industrial, equipment humming with deadly purpose. "All mining ships, target the biggest ooglies you can find. We came here to crack rocks, and these are just rocks that fight back." The converted civilian vessels looked like flying scrapyards compared to the sleek swarm bioships, but they carried something the enemy had never encountered: the determination of people who had chosen to risk everything to help strangers. Captain Santos aboard the New Hope coordinated the colony ship division, while her 3,000 volunteer colonists served as damage control teams and emergency crews. "New hope to all colony ships," Santos transmitted. "We came out here to build new worlds. Today, we're saving an old one. Let's make our families proud." Captain Clark's Paradise had been repositioned to serve as a mobile command center, its luxury communication systems now coordinating the entire civilian fleet. The 2,000 medical volunteers aboard worked frantically to keep damaged ships operational while treating casualties from across the human fleet. "Paradise to all vessels," Clark reported. "Medical teams are standing by for emergency transport. We're not losing anyone else today if we can help it." The assault on the swarm motherships defied every principle of military strategy ever developed. Instead of the careful, coordinated attacks favored by other galactic species, the human fleet struck with controlled chaos that the swarm's hive mind could not predict or counter. Rodriguez's stealth frigates appeared throughout the enemy, formation like ghosts, striking at command nodes and communication centers before vanishing back into the darkness. "Phantom Division to all ships," she reported. "Their big ships are losing coordination. Keep hitting them, and they can't adapt fast enough." The mining division proved particularly effective against the swarm's largest vessels. Captain Adams discovered that the industrial cutting beams designed to slice through asteroid cores could penetrate even the thickest bioarmor when focused properly. The Asteroid King dove into the shadow of a massive mothership, her crew working with the precision of people who had spent years dismantling celestial bodies. Liberty. This is Asteroid King. Adams transmitted with obvious satisfaction. We're inside their defensive perimeter. These things are tough, but they're not tougher than a nickel-iron asteroid. The Asteroid King's cutting beams sliced through the mothership's internal structure, while her reinforced hull absorbed counterattacks that would have destroyed any conventional warship. Within minutes, the massive swarm vessel began breaking apart from the inside as critical systems failed throughout its biological matrix. Captain Turner, aboard the Explorer, coordinated the scientific analysis that was proving crucial to the battles. Outcome. All ships, we've identified a weakness in their coordination system. The motherships control smaller vessels through biological transmissions. Disrupt the big ones and the little ones lose direction. The first mothership died in a spectacular explosion that lit up the entire star system. As its death scream echoed across subspace frequencies, the thousands of smaller swarm vessels suddenly began operating without coordination. Ships that had moved with perfect unity moments before now attacked randomly or simply stopped responding to threats. Admiral Sullivan watched from the Liberty's bridge as the tide of battle shifted dramatically. All ships, the enemy is losing coordination. Press the attack while they're confused. Captain Morrison aboard the Washington led the main battle fleet in a coordinated assault on the remaining motherships. The human warships, despite being heavily damaged from hours of combat, struck with renewed determination as they saw victory becoming possible. Washington to all battle group ships, Morrison transmitted. Form up for concentrated fire on target. Designation Alpha 2. Let's finish this. A second mothership fell to combined fire from the Washington, Denver, and Seattle, its massive bulk collapsing in on itself as the human cruisers poured everything they had into its command structure. The death of another control vessel sent ripples of confusion through the swarm fleet. Captain Park aboard the courier ship Freedom darted between the larger battles, carrying crucial intelligence and coordination data between human commanders. This is Freedom with tactical update. Enemy vessels are beginning to retreat from the outer system. They're running. What followed could barely be called a battle. The swarm vessels, suddenly without central coordination, began fleeing the system in complete disorder. Some ships attacked their own allies in confusion, while others simply powered down and drifted helplessly through space. The human fleet, despite having lost over 300 ships during the engagement, pursued the fleeing swarm vessels with relentless determination. Captain Adams and his mining division took particular pleasure in hunting down the bioships that had once seemed invincible. Asteroid King to all ships, Adams reported. We're chasing down the stragglers. These things don't seem so scary when they're running away. The battle officially ended when the last swarm mothership, attempting to escape the system, was destroyed by concentrated fire from Admiral Cross's museum ship division. The Enterprise, barely held together by emergency repairs, delivered the killing blow with weapons that were older than most of the crew members operating them. Enterprise to Liberty, Admiral Cross transmitted, her voice carrying exhaustion. And Pride in equal measure. The last big one is down. System is clear of hostile contacts. Ambassador Kalevex's transmission reached every ship in the human fleet simultaneously. To all human vessels, to all species monitoring this engagement, today we have witnessed something that will be remembered until the stars grow cold. When the Zephyrian Empire faced extinction, when every major galactic power declared us beyond salvation, one species answered our call. The Zephyrian diplomat's voice carried across space to reach not just the human fleet, but monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The humans did not send token aid or empty promises. They sent their entire civilization. Cargo ships became warships. Hospital ships became lifelines. Museum pieces became instruments of victory. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. The Void Swarm, which had consumed 12 civilizations, over the past century, had been decisively defeated for the first time in recorded history. The survivors fled toward the galactic rim, their hive mind apparently shattered by the loss of their command structure. Captain Clark, aboard the Paradise, coordinated the massive rescue and recovery operation that followed. Human and Zephyrian medical teams worked together to save lives and repair damaged ships. The converted cruise liner became a symbol of human compassion as her medical volunteers treated wounded from both fleets without distinction. Paradise. To all ships, Clark reported. Final casualty count shows we lost 312 vessels during the engagement. But we saved 40 billion Zephyrian lives and stopped an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for a century. The journey home took 3 weeks, with the surviving human ships escorting Zephyrian vessels back to their recovered worlds. The swarms, biomechanical structures on the conquered planets, began dying without their controlling motherships, allowing the Zephyrians to begin reclaiming their territory. Admiral Sullivan's final report, transmitted to both Earth Command and the Galactic Council, consisted of a single paragraph. Mission accomplished. The Zephyrian Empire has been preserved, and the Void Swarm threat has been neutralized. Human casualties were significant, but acceptable given the stakes involved. Recommend immediate diplomatic outreach to establish permanent alliance with Zephyrian survivors. The galactic response was immediate and unprecedented. The crystalline hegemony, which had refused to provide military aid, formally apologized and offered to share their defensive technologies with humanity. The Aquatic Federation proposed a mutual defense treaty. Even the Robotic Collective, which operated purely on logical calculations, requested detailed analysis of human tactical methods. But perhaps the most significant change occurred within the Galactic Council itself. Resolution 2847 was passed unanimously, granting Earth a permanent seat on the Security Council and formally recognizing humanity's actions at the Battle of Zephyr Prime. The human fleet returned to Earth, not as conquerors or heroes, but as